When it comes to the peace, our government has really not invested in building peaceful communities. One of the major focus our public policy should be on building peaceful and resilient communities. I may belong to a Muslim community, another person may belong to a Christian community. When we sit together, we're all facing the same problems. No, with just the infrastructure development, we can't really be a developed country. When countries try to develop, they of course focus on infrastructure, on roads, on buildings, bridges. They are important. But more important than infrastructure is actually the social development. We need to also invest in the behavior of the people. We also need to develop inclusive systems so that people have a sense of participation, sense of ownership. Because if the people don't own the infrastructure, then they won't protect it. So you see, when we see in our country sometimes that people come out and protest and they start damaging the public buildings, which have been built actually with their own taxpayers' money. Now, why this happens? Because they don't own that infrastructure. They don't have the feeling of owning that infrastructure. So if we really want to develop, we should of course focus on roads and infrastructure and all that, because roads also provide connectivity. No country can develop without roads, without buildings. Buildings and roads we need. But equally important, perhaps more important, is that we invest in the social capital, we invest in the education, we invest in responsible attitudes, in responsible behaviors. And for that, it's also important that we have inclusive governance systems so that people or their representatives are sitting in those institutions deciding for themselves. When it comes to the peace, our government has really not invested in building peaceful communities. One of the major focus our public policy should be on building peaceful and resilient communities. Not just in the urban centers, not just in Punjab and Sindh, but also in the remote corners of our country. And this should be a comprehensive approach. The government should really think through how the peaceful and resilient communities can be built. So peaceful and resilient community would be one which is well informed, which has sense of participation in the government affairs, because they're not feeling alienated, they're proud Pakistanis. And those communities include people who are well trained to deal with conflicts. Not just people in the communities, but also the government officials. You see, typically our government tries to resolve conflicts through law enforcement actions. But law enforcement actions don't resolve conflicts. They actually maybe suppress conflict for a while, they may manage conflict for a while, but they don't resolve conflict. Ideally, a good government policy would be to, first of all, prevent conflicts by developing inclusive systems, by promoting dialogue, by creating awareness, by building capacities. In certain situations, actually, the government decisions can lead to conflicts. So the government officials also need to be trained to really assess the consequence of their decisions. Because if the government officials are well trained about it, then for every decision, they should also apply a lens of conflict. Whether my decision will help in addressing a conflict situation, or it will create a conflict, or maybe it will exacerbate a conflict. So if the government officials are well trained, then they can make better decision making. But not just that, as I said earlier, they can help communities in arriving at consensus, at exploring the common grounds and building on them for building peaceful communities. You see, when communities start distrusting each other, there can be many reasons for that. Sometimes, this distrust is created. There can be troublemakers. There can be religious leaders who promote hate. There can be political leaders who try to win elections by promoting hate. That, they would say, oh, we are, different, and, so we should wait, all of us should wait, sometimes on biradri basis, sometimes on clan or tribal basis, and so on. So there are always people in the society who try to create divides, create drifts. So it's the government's responsibility to deal with them. Sometimes you need law enforcement action, but sometimes you also need to develop systems which reduce incentives for these kind of people. So let's say electoral system. So you can have an electoral system which actually incentivizes those people who thrive on deviance, and you can also have an electoral system which actually discourage those kind of people. Similarly, Election Commission of Pakistan can come up with a code of conduct whereby such people are discouraged. So that's one part of it. When deviance exists, you identify those fault lines, the government people and also civil society leaders, those who are working for peace, they can play a role, and they can, let's say, bring people from diverse communities together. They can help them engage in a constructive dialogue, a well-moderated dialogue. Because, sometimes when you bring people together, it's also possible that the frictions between them increase. But, with good moderation, you can help them navigate through their differences and help them find out a common ground. You see, when conflict happens at a certain place, it's really hard to address it. And it's easier to prevent a conflict if our policymakers are really trained for it and sensitive to it. to manage that conflict, to resolve that conflict, you have to really work hard. And for that, you need a comprehensive approach. It should happen through schools, so investing in our future actually with children, so that they're better informed about it, better sensitized about it. In schools, there may be teachers studying from different social backgrounds, different communities. So they can be the ones, who, if they establish good relationships, primary schools and middle schools and high schools, they're the youth, our upcoming youth. They can really help in that if they go back to their families. And that's typically the young people, who are more vulnerable to conflict. So investing in them is really helpful. You see, that's where the role of a civil society and the government comes in. Because they should really do a kind of a conflict analysis and see that there are people, who are profiting for it. Let's say we look at the social media and there are people, the monetized platforms. So some people, always do promote these divisive narratives, hate-based narratives, because they sell. If you blame someone, and talk about some persons and, their character or something, there more people would be curious about it, So you may get more views, that channel may get more views, that social media may get more views, and the person who is doing it would be benefiting from those views because social media platforms monetize it. Similarly, traditionally, we have seen that the politicians, the religious leaders who would promote hate-based narratives, they would become more popular. Because sometimes, the common people, they're not just looking for information. Sometimes they kind of enjoy kind of a drama, loud voices. But in our country, the law enforcement is weak, judicial processes are weak, and we also have fewer voices in the civil society. So really standing up to these kind of narratives. So on all these fronts, we need to work. But our major problem is kind of a weak democratic system. You see, when your system is democratic, truly democratic, when people trust it, then they have a sense of participation. Because then people think that I have a stake, I have a role to play, this is my government, I have established it by the power of my vote, and I can influence it through my freedom of speech and expression. And if this time I was unable to help the party win which I support, maybe I have a chance after 5 years. So if that kind of a thinking exists, then people stay connected with the process and they remain positive, they remain hopeful. My party has lost, but after 5 years it can win. So I remain peaceful and I keep engaged in a peaceful political struggle. But if people lose that hope, then they get alienated. They feel powerless, helpless. Oh, I have no chance of, the party that I support may never win the elections. I have no way of influencing the government. So then they become helpless, and sometimes they opt for kind of extra legal efforts. As a result, the conflict exacerbates. So our country need to do much better in terms of developing an inclusive democratic system. That's, I think, a major problem.